right, so I'm here with Rob Tod, the founder of Allagash Brewery from Portland, Maine, at the Blind Tiger again for another awesome event. So what brings you personally to New York?
We've done this event every year at the Blind Tiger for, I don't know, probably close to 10 years. Obviously, it was at a different location originally, but it's a great event, and I wouldn't miss it for the world. We do it in November every single year. And I was also here for the Union Beer, who's our distributor in New York, for their tasting, which was a blast. It was a good event.
Awesome. So I was actually at your brewery a couple of years ago, and you know, some of these beers I've never heard of before, and when I come to these events I try to try as many beers that I haven't had before, you know, so that I can review them on my blog. But from you personally as a founder of the brewery, what's been happening at the brewery the past couple of years?
Yeah, a lot.
I know you've gotten a lot of new fermenters and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I've seen the pictures online.
We've been busy. We've been increasing capacity quite a bit. We put a new brew house in, which was a huge undertaking. That's done now. The dust is settled, and we can kind of focus on making beer. But the installation went well, and we put the system in. We started brewing on it in May, and we are very gradually transitioning production onto that new system between May and December, just making sure from a sensory perspective and all the other analysis perspective, basically that the beer is identical coming off the new system versus the old system. But yeah, so new brew house, lots of new fermenters, new bottling line, so it's been a big undertaking at the brewery.
Right, so I mean, there's of course one of the things that makes your brewery unique is the cool ship and the sours, and some of the barrel-aged beers, but one of the original beers that really made barrel-aged beers that made you guys famous was a Curio.
Yeah.
So just to get a little bit of background on that beer, you know, I mean, I know some beer geeks might be interested in your new stuff, but can you just talk a little about the history of Curio and where it is nowadays, and what are you doing with it nowadays to make it still stand out amongst all the barrel-aged beers that come out now?
Yeah, the Curio, we kind of stumbled into that beer. We had, the story basically was that we originally with our triple, we just bottled it, we didn't put it on draft, and we had a delay in a shipment of bottles from Europe, it only came in the 750 milliliter bottle, and there was a bottle delay, and we basically were going to have to dump about 200 gallons of beer because the bottle delivery got delayed. But we had some Jim Beam barrels at the brewery, so instead of dumping the beer, which didn't have a home in the bottles, we put it in the Jim Beam barrels and tasted it a few days later, and we were blown away by the flavors. It just totally transformed the beer. And we didn't think we'd sell much of it, but every single year we just haven't been able to make enough of that beer. And it still sells like crazy, and we're probably going through well over 100 Jim Beam barrels a month. We only use the barrel one time for that beer. Go through over 100 a month just trying to keep up with that beer, and there's really not a whole lot of beers out there, really no beers out there like it flavor-wise. It's got a really cool coconut vanilla flavor, and just with innovation in general, which the Curio was a pretty, and still is a pretty innovative beer. One of the great things about the new brew house is that the old brew house is now freed up just to do innovative stuff. So we're really going to be ramping up the barrel-aged beers and the innovative beers.
Right, so getting a little more in-depth with your, cool ship and your barrel-aged beers, what's the process of brewing a beer that is going to go into the cool ship and go to barrels? Like, how does it start and then go to the cool ship and then go to barrels?
Well, that beer, we brew it on our original brew house, and we brew it very much in the tradition of the Belgian lambics. We don't call it lambic out of respect to the Belgian brewers, but we brew it in that lambic tradition, very much the same way they brew it in Belgium. Spends the night in the cool ship, and then the next morning it goes into basically a stainless tank just to kind of homogenize and mix, and then it goes straight into French oak and starts to ferment in oak and spends about 2 years in oak. And all the spontaneous beers are the same base beer, but then we'll do different things, like the Resurgam is a blend of young spontaneous beer, 1 year old, 2 year old, sometimes older. And the Cerise is one that we age on cherries. The red we age with raspberries. So we do a lot of different things with that base beer.
I mean, a question that many beer geeks probably have. I know with the FE13, it got some wide distribution. Do you have plans now that you have the new brew house to take some of those sours, which are usually, brewery release only, and taking them and brewing them on a higher, capacity and actually releasing them to more states than just Portland, Maine?
Definitely. That's really what we want to try to do. We've with our original brew house now being freed up by being able to move some capacity over to the new brew house, we hope to brew a lot more of those beers. And we actually made a big investment, and we were able to buy back our original facility, which we never owned. And we leased it for about a dozen years, moved out, built a new facility. We were able to buy that facility back, which is right next door, and basically gutted that building and turned it into a kind of funky beer facility. So we have a number of stainless tanks, which we're doing cool fruit beers in, and we have space for about 600 oak barrels. So we definitely plan to ramp up those beers and hope to get it into wider distribution.
Very nice, very nice. So, of course, in 1 second we'll talk about the New York craft beer scene, but not many craft beer just make it up to the Northeast. The West Coast is really well known for its barrel programs, and section in the Midwest for beers you can't really get. But what's the Portland craft beer scene like nowadays? How has it grown? Of course, you were one of the first more popular Portland breweries. So what's the Maine craft beer scene like? Especially with you and Allagash brewing such innovative barrel-aged and amazing Belgian-style beers.
Portland craft beer scene is exploding. I mean, just food in general in Portland, Maine is exploding. Lots of cool restaurants opening up, lots of cool bars opening, and a ton of new breweries. Rising Tide, Oxbow, Maine Beer Company, Bunker Brewing. There's just tons of cool breweries opening up. And it makes it exciting and fun, and we're definitely welcoming. We don't look at it as competition at all. It's just kind of continuing to drive innovation and give people new experiences with beer. And it's a lot of fun. It's cool, and there are a lot more breweries that are queued up to open pretty soon. So it's exciting. I mean, there's a lot going on in Portland and a lot of cool new beers coming out.
Right. Comparing to Portland, I know you said you do this event with Blind Tiger, every year, once a year in November time around the Union Beer Distributor trade show. Mm-hmm. So what's your view of the New York craft beer scene?
I love coming to New York. I love spending time in the city and checking out all the cool new restaurants and bars opening up, and then being able to come see old friends like Dave at the Blind Tiger. I mean, Blind Tiger's been supporting us for years, so I love coming to New York. A lot of cool breweries opening up in the area, and I love coming down here. And it's just like a lot of cities in the country, the craft beer movement is just exploding in New York.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, like you said, you're planning on expanding and, expanding your distribution, and so that's some of the new stuff coming out. But, like you, Rob Tod from Allagash, you're one of the more respected figures amongst the East Coast craft breweries. Allagash is known as one of the, pioneers of really Belgian-style beers among craft breweries. But what's your how are you experiencing the current growth of craft beer? Has your palate changing? How's your, view of craft beer changing as, now that there's so many, like you said, in Portland especially, it's, not such a well-visited area by, New Yorkers especially. And how is your palate changing? How is your view of craft beer changing as there's so much growth going on nowadays?
My view of craft beer and palate isn't really changing, but it's just exciting to me that there are so many people out there that are getting involved in craft beer and trying new beers and kind of willing to experiment with everything that's going on now, kind of discovering that there's so many more people out there that are open to discovering what's going on in craft beer. So it's just exciting to see. It's
well, cool. Again, we'll wrap it up. Just thank you for coming to New York, making the trip down, and thank you for all these amazing beers, and definitely look forward to being inspired by you and Allagash and seeing more of your beers in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cheers.